Clara adjusted her dress as she watched the activity on the family farm. Family gatherings were always marked by laughter, nostalgic memories, and a hint of drama. This time, however, something seemed different. Maybe it was the weight of the exhausting routine in her marriage, or simply the expectation of seeing her dear relatives again. Among the uncles and cousins who greeted her warmly, she noticed a distinct figure in the distance. Enrique, her mother's older brother. Leaning against a tree, he watched everything with an almost enigmatic smile. Enrique had always had a peculiar aura, rarely appearing at these gatherings. Now, with his gray hair and confident posture, he seemed even more intriguing. Enrique came this time, her mother commented casually, interrupting Clara's thoughts. He doesn't usually come, does he? Clara replied, trying to sound indifferent, but something in her had already been awakened by the sight of him. Later, during dinner, Clara noticed Enrique's eyes crossing hers. He spoke little, but his presence was almost tangible. While the others were engaged in lively conversations, she felt an inexplicable attraction, like a silent magnet. After dinner, Clara escaped to the balcony, seeking the coolness of the night to organize her thoughts. It wasn't long before she heard footsteps behind her. "Enjoying the tranquility of the night?" Enrique asked, appearing at the door with a glass of wine in his hand. "Yes, sometimes it's good to escape the hustle and bustle," she replied, trying to hide her nervousness. "You always preferred to observe rather than participate, didn't you?" He approached, stopping beside her. They remained silent for a few moments, watching the stars. The tension between them grew, but Clara didn't know how to break the moment. "You've changed," he said suddenly, looking at her. "Everyone changes, don't they?" Clara replied with a slight smile, without looking at him directly. "Some change for the better," he replied. The tone of his voice made Clara finally look at him. Their eyes met for too long. Disconcerted, she looked away, feeling her cheeks burn. "I'm going in," she said quickly, breaking the moment and returning inside. That night, as she tried to sleep next to Daniel, her husband, Enrique's words echoed in her mind. Something in the way he looked at her stirred her in a way she couldn't ignore. Clara knew she was crossing a dangerous line in her thoughts, but she couldn't help it. The next morning, the house was full of movement. Breakfast was a noisy celebration, with laughter and conversations going on around the table. Clara tried to maintain her composure, but Enrique's presence continued to unsettle her. He was at the other end of the table, his relaxed posture at odds with the whirlwind of emotions she was trying to disguise. "Clara, it looks like you didn't sleep well," her mother commented, drawing everyone's attention. "Just a little tired," she replied, trying hard to smile. Enrique looked up from his coffee cup and met Clara's eyes. The slight smile on his face seemed loaded with intentions that she didn't want to decipher. Clara quickly looked away, feeling her heart race. Later, while the others went for a walk around the property, she decided to stay in the house. She needed a moment alone, away from the questions and stares that were starting to feel heavy. Sitting on the porch, she tried to concentrate on a book, but the tension in her body made it impossible to follow the words. "You always liked quiet moments, didn't you?" Enrique said, appearing suddenly. Clara looked up, surprised. "I thought you had gone out with the others." "I'm not a big fan of long walks," he replied, sitting in the chair next to her. The silence between them was thick, loaded with something Clara couldn't name, but Enrique seemed comfortable, as if he understood exactly what she was feeling. "You're different, Clara," he said, his voice low and calm. "Different how?" She tried to sound relaxed, though her breathing betrayed her nervousness. "More confident, more in control. Or maybe I'm just seeing you in a way I didn't before." Clara laughed nervously. You have a talent for turning anything into something deeper, you know? Or maybe I'm just saying exactly what I'm thinking, he replied, leaning toward her slightly. Before she could respond, Enrique reached out and touched her hand. The gesture was subtle, but loaded with meaning. Clara should have recoiled, but she stood still, her eyes locked on his. "This is a dangerous game," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Only if you're not willing to play," he replied, his tone challenging. When he leaned in closer, their lips finally met. The kiss was slow, intense, as if they had both been waiting for it for a long time. Clara felt her body react, torn between guilt and desire. Before they could go any further, she pulled away abruptly. "This can't happen, Henry," she said breathlessly. "It already has," he replied with disconcerting calm. Clara stood up quickly, trying to regain control. "This ends here," she said, but her voice sounded more like a plea than a firm decision. She went back into the house, her heart racing as she climbed the stairs. She knew something inside her had changed, and even though she tried to deny it, she felt like this was only the beginning. The next few days were a whirlwind of guilt and tension for Clara. She avoided Henry at all costs, but his presence seemed inevitable. During breakfast, gatherings in the garden, or casual conversations, everything seemed imbued with a silent energy that no one else seemed to notice. One afternoon, while everyone was spreading out across the property, Clara decided to retreat to the guest room. She needed a moment to herself. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she tried to calm her mind when she heard a soft knock on the door. "Clara," it was Henry. She froze, her heart racing. Before she could respond, he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Nor should you be hiding," he replied calmly, moving closer. Clara stood up quickly, trying to create some distance between them. "I told you, Henry, this has to stop." "You did, but I don't think you really want this," he replied, his voice firm and calm. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, struggling to hide her vulnerability. "Because I see something in you that you try to hide," he replied, looking directly into her eyes. "And because I know you feel the same way." Clara should have pushed him away, left the room, but her body wouldn't react. When Henry reached up and caressed her face, a shiver ran down her skin. "This is wrong," she murmured, but her words sounded without conviction. "Then tell me to stop," he challenged, moving even closer. She said nothing. Their lips met again, and this time the kiss was more intense, more desperate. Her hands initially tried to push him away, but soon grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer. The tension between them was almost unbearable as Henry gently pushed her against the wall. For a moment, there was nothing else but the desire that consumed them. The sound of footsteps in the hallway brought them back to reality. Clara pushed him away, both breathing heavily. "That was reckless," she said, quickly adjusting her clothes. "And that's why it felt so good," he replied with a teasing smile. Before anyone could say more, the door opened. It was Daniel. "Clara, what are you doing here?" "I just needed a moment alone," she replied, avoiding looking at Enrique. Daniel gave her a suspicious look, but said nothing. "Dinner's almost ready. Shall we?" "Sure," Clara replied, hurrying out, feeling the weight of Daniel's gaze and Enrique's on her back. That night, while trying to sleep, Clara received a text from Enrique. "You know this isn't over, and you don't want it to be either." She deleted the text immediately, but the words echoed in her mind. Guilt and desire fought an incessant battle inside her, and the outcome remained uncertain. In the days that followed, Clara lived in a constant state of alert. Daniel seemed more attentive to her movements, while Enrique, with his calm and confident presence, made everything even more complicated. The tension between the three of them was almost palpable, and Clara knew that the situation was on the verge of exploding. That afternoon, while everyone was resting after lunch, Clara decided to escape to the garden. She sat on a bench under the shade of a tree, trying to organize the thoughts that haunted her. It wasn't long before Enrique appeared, as if he knew exactly where to find her. "Clara," he said softly, stopping at her side. "Please, Enrique, not now," she replied without even looking at him. "Now is exactly the time," he insisted, sitting down next to her. "You can't run away from this forever." "I'm not running away," she said, her voice thick with frustration. "I'm trying to protect everything." "And who's protecting you?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Clara finally looked at him, her eyes burning with a mixture of anger and vulnerability. "You think this is easy for me? You think I don't feel the weight of this every day?" Henry leaned forward, his face serious. "I think you're trying to fight something you've already decided." Before Clara could respond, Daniel appeared. His expression was dark. "What's going on here?" Clara froze, unable to find the words. Henry, on the other hand, remained calm. "We're just talking," he replied. "Talking? Because it doesn't seem like it," Daniel said, crossing his arms and glancing between the two of them. "That's all, Daniel." "Don't start," Clara interjected, standing up quickly. "Don't start what?" "To notice how strange you've been acting lately? To see how you two are always together." Daniel's voice grew louder with each word. Clara tried to intervene. "You're imagining things, Daniel." "Am I really?" He pointed at Henry. "And you're going to deny that something is happening?" Henry stood up slowly, his eyes fixed on Daniel. "You don't understand the situation." "Then explain it to me," Daniel shouted, clearly out of his mind. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara felt her heart race as Henry seemed to ponder his next words. Finally, he looked at Daniel. "There's no way to explain something you're not prepared to hear," he said calmly. Daniel looked back at Clara, waiting for an answer. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come out. Her expression of pain and regret was enough for him to understand. Without saying anything else, Daniel turned and left, leaving the two of them alone in the garden. Clara felt tears roll down her face. "That's all over," she murmured. Henry tried to get closer, but she held up her hand, stopping him. "No, Henry. I made my choice, and it's not you." "You can say that, but you know it's not true," he replied with disconcerting calm. "Even if it was, it doesn't matter anymore," she said before quickly walking away. That night, Clara began to pack her things. Daniel had left without saying where he was going, and she knew there would be no easy way back. When she received a last message from Enrique, she deleted it without even reading it. Lying alone in bed, Clara realized that what had started as a moment of desire had turned into a spiral of loss and regret. Did you like this story? If so, leave a comment telling us what you thought, and, if you've ever experienced something similar, share it with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any new content. Here, we always bring life stories, reflections, and real experiences, all with great sincerity. Thank you for watching until the end and for being part of this journey. See you in the next video.